to I joined Federation almost 3 years ago, and my role is the Israel program manager. We have the I Center in Federation, the Israel Center, sorry. I was just in a conference. And we have a lot of awesome programs together with the partnership with Rehovot. I help teenagers here in our community to get scholarship to go to their first Israel experience whatsoever. And just like Israel stuff in our community, events and some pretty fun stuff. Yeah. So that's a little bit about me. And I think if we have a little bit of time, I can share a little bit about Federation after, but maybe let's roll with like everybody, like our guests. And then if you have any more question about Federation, I'm happy to answer.
Great. So I'll start rolling off we'll have the Minneapolis side introduce themselves, and then the students will introduce themselves with their first names. And I think that's about it. So Rabbi Jill, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Rabbi Jill Abram, and I'll try to keep it brief. I have been a rabbi since 2013, ordained from the Reform Movement, Hebrew Union College. That's where I studied, and have been in Minneapolis since 2013. My first 10 years at a congregation as a pulpit rabbi. And I just left my position over the summer and am working with those who don't affiliate with a synagogue in the broader Jewish community. And I'll be talking much more about that later. But it's nice to meet you all. Thank you for participating in this amazing program, and really grateful to be with you.
Thanks, Rabbi Jill. It's good to have you with us. Jacob?
Hi, everybody. My name is Jacob Milner, and I've worked in the Jewish community for many, many years in the Twin Cities and nationally. My most recent position, actually, I just recently left, was with the American Jewish Committee, and I was there for about the last 5 years, working in a national capacity, working to coordinate AJC and other Jewish organizations, national Jewish organizations. So I'm happy to talk about that and how Jewish community has kind of responded post-October 7th, but also with the rise in anti-Semitism we've seen in the United States as well, how they're working together, what are some of the highlights there. Since then, I've actually left AJC within the past few weeks, and I've moved over actually to a foundation, so still in the same space, but on the giving money away side instead of the asking for money side of things, which they tell me is more fun. So happy to talk about that as well. But I'm excited to talk with you all, and it's a really great that you all are participating in this program.
It's wonderful having you with us, Jacob. Thanks. Benji, you're next.
Hello, I'm Benji Kaplan. I am the Hillel Director here at the University of Minnesota in the state of Minnesota. I've been in this role for about 11 years. I've spent about 17 years of my life on college campuses. I've led 27 trips to Israel for Jewish students and non-Jewish students. And I'm sure there are lots of questions on your end about what's happening on American college campuses these days, and I'm happy to get into that with you a little bit, but glad to be with you and being able to share a little bit about what's happening in the college space.
Awesome. Thanks, Benji. Israel side, just go ahead, get off mute, and just say your name, whatever you want about yourself, no specific order, and be brief, please. I'm calling you out first, Lucy.
Hi, my name is
I'll
Lucy.
start. Okay, Lucy, go.
Hi, my name is Lucy. Nice to meet you. I'm a student of art therapy.
I am Hodaya. I study agriculture and biotechnology in Rehovot.
Hi, my name is Mai. I'm a student for this communication disorder, and I'm happy to be with you.
Hi, my name is Dudi. I am an art therapy student. Very excited with this meeting, and nice to meet you all.
Yeah, I'm Raz. I study environmental economics. I'm 25, and Doreen, have you?
Hi, I'm Doreen Wittesheim. I am a third year veterinary student in the Hebrew in Rehovot.
Hi everyone, my name is Joel. I'm a first year student in Masters in Biochemistry in Rehovot.
Hi, I'm Shahar. I'm doing Master in Biomolecular Science in the Weizmann Institute in Rehovot.
Hi, I'm Liron. I'm living in Rehovot and I'm learning clinic nutrition in Ashkelon Academic College.
You see why I told you I'm proud of my lot. So in the same order, Rabbi Jill, we'd love to hear more from you.
Awesome. So I will, Alon, if you want to just sort of cut me off, if I was, thinking like 10 minutes, is that appropriate or?
Yeah, we'll do 10 and then Q&A, just like Eilat wrote.
Okay, perfect. So I am going to talk a little bit with you all about the nature of the demographic of, in general, the American Jewish community, but specifically the Twin Cities in regards to what we call intermarriage. I wanted to start by naming that I actually don't like the term intermarriage or interfaith marriage because it's not really reflective of what's actually happening on the ground. So like an interfaith relationship would typically be one that would be understood a marriage between one person who is Jewish and somebody who is not Jewish. But the term interfaith implies that the other person who isn't Jewish is actively practicing a different faith, which is very rarely the case. Occasionally, you will have a situation where there'll be, one partner who identifies as, actively practicing Christianity. But the vast majority of the time, these types of relationships are between one person who is Jewish and another person who, for lack of a better term, just identifies as secular, who doesn't have any connection to any faith, or they actually feel connected to Judaism. They just haven't gone through a formal conversion process. So I wanted to start with that because I think it's really critical in understanding who the population is. And also, just even thinking about how these families connect to Judaism and how they connect to Israel. Because most of the time, it's not 100% of the time, but most of the time, the family is operating as a Jewish family, even though one of the partners is not formally Jewish. And so I wanted to start there because it really impacts everything else. Second, I just wanted to share just some basic demographics so you have a sense of the numbers of what we're talking about. The data I'm going to share is just a little bit old. It's from 2019. We did a population study in the Twin Cities during that year for Minneapolis and St. Paul. And the study found that approximately half of all married couples, Jewish households, are what they call intermarried, where one partner is Jewish and the other isn't. The exact number is 48%, if you want to get technical. And that often, I don't know if that's surprising to you, if that seems high or low. I don't know. I'm curious. I'm as curious about your a reaction as you probably are. So maybe if you want to put in the chat if you thought that data is high or low, feel free. But obviously this has been a trend that has been increasing over time. So this study, broke it down by age demographic. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but I think it's really interesting. Those who are, 65 and older, the data skews, almost the opposite, where it's like 60 to 70% of that age demographic is married, is the English term, married to Jewish people married. And 30 to 40% are in an interfaith relationship. But then when you get down to the younger demographics, so when the people who are between the ages of 22 and 34, it's the exact opposite. So 41% of those couples are married, 2 Jews married, and 59% of people between the ages of 22 and 34, 1 Jewish partner and 1 partner who is not Jewish. And when we think about I guess I should clarify when I use the term we, when we meaning the Twin Cities Jewish community who is not ultra Orthodox, we consider these households to be Jewish households, at least from the basis of the study, but also like moving away from data, just in terms of who is participating in the Jewish community in various congregations, in life in Federation, in the JCC, in other organized Jewish Jewish institutions and organizations. It is these households. I don't want to spend my time talking about like the ultra Orthodox community. It's kind of not the best use of time. But as I'm sure you can imagine, they have a different perspective on what makes a Jewish household. So just speaking, only from the rest of the Jewish community. And I wanted to share just like very, very briefly that the work that I'm doing now, and I think part of what, why ALOT wanted me to participate in this call was to share a little bit about some of the efforts that are being made across the country, and an effort that I'm making here in Minneapolis and St. Paul is to try to really reach a lot of these families who don't engage in the formal Jewish community as much as we hope and wish that they would. And, even like, Benji could he's probably going to talk about something different, but probably could speak a little bit about how a lot of times, kids who grew up in a home that is a Jewish household, but a home that is an interfaith family who maybe didn't belong to a synagogue. Oftentimes those kids, they grow up, they are told they're Jewish, they celebrate Jewish holidays, they have, a Jewish network, but their Jewish literacy is pretty low. And then they often end up going to college and sometimes feeling lost or feeling, like they don't know where to turn. They didn't grow up going to synagogue, going to religious school, going to Jewish overnight camp. But it's a really big part of our population. Only 30% of the community belongs to a synagogue, and the 70% who don't, many of them come from interfaith families, and their sense of Jewish pride is really high, but their connections and their literacy is really low. One of the things that's interesting. So anyway, I left my synagogue in order to start an organization to really specifically target this demographic and to lift up and validate the idea that you can still have a rich Jewish life, even if you don't belong to a synagogue. In some ways, it's there's an interesting parallel between what it like traditionally looks like to be Chiloni. In Israel, obviously, it's not the same thing, but there's some interesting parallels there. And where I wanted to kind of end, and I think I'm getting to my 10-minute time, is obviously talking about Israel and how this population, thinks about, connects to Israel. In general, I would say in a pre-October 7th world, oftentimes this population would just be described as having just generally low connection to Israel. It's not that they're pro-Israel. It's not that they're anti-Israel. They just don't have a connection. It's not part of, if all they're doing in their Jewish life is celebrating Hanukkah and Passover, they just don't necessarily see Israel as part of their identity. I think that that's changed a bit since October 7th. And maybe both, you'll hear maybe later a little bit from Benji and Jacob just about a little bit more why that might be. Because I'm not necessarily focusing on that. But I, at least anecdotally, I'm not sure there's been studies about this yet. I have seen that this population has really started to seek out opportunities to engage in conversations about Israel, because like it or not, they're now part of sort of experiencing anti-Semitism because of what's happening, whereas before it maybe was sort of less, it wasn't as front of center in their minds. And so I have personally been having a lot of experiences of working with non-Jewish members of Jewish households in talking about the situation in Israel. So I'll leave it there. That's my 10 minutes. But hopefully at the end, if there are any questions, I'm happy to address them. And also after the fact, if you want to follow up with me.
I think we can actually do like a 5-minute Q&A now.
Oh, okay, great.
So we don't lose the thread.
Sounds good.
Israel. Could you repeat the percentage that you said, like, of families that are, did you say 48?
48% overall.
So yeah, I found it a little bit high, but I don't know what other people thought.
Does it also include the secular Jews?
Yeah.
Oh, so I think that's the same over here. I think the secular percentage in Israel is around that percentage. No, alone.
Well, that percentage was how many people are like married. 48% of married Jewish people who are married to someone who's not Jewish. So I'm not talking about secular. I'm talking like a secular Jewish person marrying somebody who is maybe grew up Christian but doesn't identify as Christian anymore. They're not Jewish.
It's not just people who belong in the synagogue, and also secular Jews. That's not part of that statistic.
Yeah, I hope I'm understanding the question correctly. But I think
it refers to the number of people who identify as Jews in married couples, as one partner identifies as a Jew and the other partner doesn't necessarily identify with any other religion, but is not part of the Jewish religion. Was that precise?
Yes. Secular is a really hard term to use because it's not the way that secular is defined in it. I don't mean Chiloni. That's not what I mean.
Oh,
I don't mean that. I mean, I don't even know what the Hebrew, like literally no, like not I'm Jewish and I'm not religious, but I'm actually not Jewish. Yeah.
I have a question about, you said that you're starting a new program for like the youth that are feeling not completely like into the Jewish community and want more like to discover. So when I was in Birthright, actually we had like a lot of talks about it, and like what you said is exactly what they said. They always said like they feel this gap, they don't know what to do with it. So I'm just curious, like what is your like future plans? Like which activities would you thought about doing? It's like really intriguing. I'm really curious.
Yeah. And I think you're right. The Birthright population has a huge number of these people who maybe like they didn't grow up going to a synagogue, but they're Jewish. So you're exactly right. So a lot of the program, I want to do sort of a mix of different things. I want to do a lot of independent rituals. So like B'nai Mitzvah, becoming bar bat mitzvah for people who don't belong to a synagogue, but that's still a meaningful path for them. I want to do programming that is a little bit more like one-off programming is how I describe it. Like you maybe like really only want to do programming for Hanukkah and Passover. And you're not looking to like pay membership dues at a congregation. You just want like sort of smaller doses of Jewish life. And it'll be very like holiday centric. or small groups, forming small groups, travel, wide range of things.
Yeah, it sounds good, like, because I really saw in Birthright they had a lot of fun, but like the minute they entered like the synagogue, they had like this, I don't know what to do, and then like it turned them a little bit backwards. So I think that's really amazing what you're doing.
Thank you.
I have a question. In your own personal opinion, do you think that the percentage of Jews and non-Jews that are getting married is a problem for the continuing of Judaism in the United States, in North America? Do you think it may be an issue if it's too much, or do you think it's actually helping more Jews to create more connections and people who are not Jewish to become part of our society, of our religion? Do you think it's positive or negative?
It's a great question. And this is where you will get like different perspectives from different people who you ask. My opinion is that it's positive. Also, I grew up in an interfaith. I didn't tell my whole personal story, but my dad is not Jewish. And look at me, I became a rabbi. So, I think my opinion is that you can have a as vibrant of a Jewish life and household, even if not everybody in that household is Jewish. And in some ways, it could actually be an opportunity to grow the Jewish population, if you want to look at it that way. But my personal perspective is that you can have a rich Jewish life and a Jewish home, even if not everybody is Jewish. And so I see it as a positive thing. Not many rabbis will disagree with me.
Well, it's opinion that needs to be heard. If you guys have any more questions.
Jill,
Go
can
ahead,
I add a piece to Jill's answer? I think one of the problems that we see within our community, right, is if you have these homes that are made up of people of different faiths, different backgrounds, and there's only one Jew in the home, and you have, from where I'm sitting, out of 10 Jewish young people, on average of 6 of them are coming from a home of mixed backgrounds. The community is spending all of their resources focusing on these 4 that are left, who end up marrying each other. And you end up having 2 Jewish households for every 10 young Jews. And our community here in America needs to start shifting and thinking about how do we invest in these 6 so that they raise their children Jewish. And if we don't concentrate on how we get these 6 to raise their children Jewish, we end up with a much smaller community in 50 to 100 years.
Exactly.
Wow. Well versed, well articulated. So I think, Benji, why don't you go ahead and go ahead.
I'll jump over Jacob, and then he can bring us home. So thank you again for having me. Again, I've been doing this work, Jewish communal work, for about 20 years. I also have a master's degree in nonprofit management with a specific targeting on the Jewish community. So I do a lot of studying of the community as well as getting to work with the community. By just a quick show of hands, how many of you know what Hillel is? It's about half and half. So about actually 100 years ago this year, Hillel started as a space on college campuses across the country because there was no space for Jewish students, or there was limited availability for Jewish students to participate in certain spaces and in certain universities. It started here in the Midwest, in Illinois, Chicago, and Minnesota was one of the first 5 or 6 Hillels in the country, and we've been here for about 83, 84 years in Minnesota. The work that we do is across a whole different spectrum of things, and I'll try to get to all of them. But we really think of it in terms of 3 buckets. One being engagement, which means like finding the Jewish students and connecting to them in some way. The other is programming, so putting together activities that draw people together to participate in Jewish life. And the last piece is empowerment, which is trying to help students take on leadership roles within their community so that they can be the thinkers and doers and partners in our work. Now, the one thing I always So I've led a lot of birthright trips, and a lot of what I try to say to is we have 10 Israelis that travel with us for that period of time. And one of the first things I say to them when meeting the American counterparts is to remember that when our group hits the ground, the difference that they have in their Judaism is that for the Israelis in the group, you get to wake up being Jewish. You have a Jewish calendar, you have a Jewish language, you have Jewish holidays, you live in a Jewish space where even if you didn't actively attempt to be Jewish, you're in a space where you get to be Jewish. The American students who are coming, if they don't actively try to be Jewish, it's just not there for them, right? We don't live in a country or in a space or on a campus where Jewish is at the forefront of anything, right? Our campus doesn't celebrate Jewish holidays. In fact, more often than not, school starts on Rosh Hashanah, and there's a football game on Yom Kippur, and there's other things that happen. So that's just not what's happening here. We don't speak Hebrew on campus, even though probably 30 or so students take Hebrew through the university. It is really an opportunity for both our Israeli participants and our American participants to realize that we come to our Judaism differently, and that in America and probably in other parts of the world as well, being Jewish is an active thing. You have to actively participate in it. And so really when we think about what we do on our college campuses, it is all about activating, right? So that first piece is extremely important though, because if we can't find students and engage them, it's much harder to do the next two pieces. So a significant part of Hillel's work is being out in campus spaces, whether that's at a table somewhere handing out information about a holiday that's coming up, or handing out flyers about an Israel speaker that's coming to campus. It's a lot of being out in spaces, just meeting people. We know, for example, there are about 1,200 Jewish students here at the University of Minnesota, and we have only met 400 of them. We are on a large campus that's very spread out. As Jill mentioned, people identify differently here in different ways. They may come from a home where their father is Jewish, and they don't understand that they can come explore Jewish at Hillel, even though they weren't raised in a Jewish home. So a lot of times it's just finding those connection points and being able to say to people, come, welcome, be part of our community, check it out. And 200 or 300 students come through our doors once a year just to see what it's all about, or to experience a Passover Seder, or to celebrate Hanukkah and light candles. But we do have probably 250, 300 students who are active participants in our campus community. The programmatic space of what we do, we see as divided into a couple of different buckets. And these are really the areas where we feel like for us, and I think Jill touched on this as well, which is there are a lot of different ways to connect to Jewish life here. And our goal isn't to get everybody to be an Orthodox Jew who lives the Torah and the mitzvot and everything else. It is to find their own personal connection that allows them to carry something into their adult life that sustains their Judaism. So for us, we put that into several different buckets. One is purely social. A significant portion of our students are coming out for the purely social gatherings. Believe it or not, for Rosh Hashanah, we have a meal, we have services, and then we throw a big New Year's party, because that's what secular Jews think of when they think of New Year's, right? So we throw a Jewish New Year's party. So there's a lot of social opportunities. We do a lot of work in the social action Tikkun Olam space. You probably can see within the Jewish context, a lot of work being done in these spaces. And college students especially are very interested in getting involved with making the world a better place. We do a lot in regards to leadership development. I'm actually departing in a week to take a group of students to Argentina for 2 weeks to learn about global Jewish life in other parts of the world and do some leadership development stuff along the way. We also have classes that we teach around leadership development. We also have an Israel class, Israel being another component, one of our other pillars that we work on. Similar to Noah, we have an Israeli emissary through the Jewish Agency who is on our staff full time. They work with a group of students around Israel programming and Israel education, 2 birthright trips to Israel each year. We used to run a group to Rehovot every year for a volunteer trip. We haven't run that trip in a couple of years since pre-pandemic, but hopefully it will come back at some point in time. We also run a trip for non-Jewish students that spends 5 days meeting with Israelis, 5 days meeting with Palestinians, and it is really a deep dive into the conflict and getting to meet real people and not just depend on the media to understand what's happening in that part of the world. It is an intense 10 days, but the number of students who come back understanding the complexities of it and can tell people who want them to believe that it's a simple binary right and wrong situation, they can see through those narratives. We do a lot around Jewish learning, and also every week during the school year we do a Shabbat gathering, and we celebrate any Jewish holiday that falls during the academic year. All of these things are led by a staff team of 8 people and a student leadership group of about 45 student leaders who have come up through different programs that we offer. And again, these pillars really allow for students who, so for example, we have 3 students who came back from a birthright trip. They're very interested in sharing their experience, getting other people on campus to experience Israel culture and history. And so they are involved in leadership of our Israel space, helping plan those programs. So those 6 or 7 buckets that I mentioned, each one has 3 to 5 students that help in planning that work and making sure that those are available to their peers on campus. In addition to the 500 or 600 Jewish students that we see each year, we serve anywhere from 200 to 300 non-Jewish students each year who either just like our space as a space to study, or they're coming with their roommate to experience Jewish culture, or they saw a speaker or program that we're presenting and they had interest in learning more. But all in all, our goal is similar to Jill's in that so many people are coming to campus without much Jewish background. And we know from statistics that American Jews between the ages of 18 and 25 develop the connection to Jewish life that they are going to carry into their adulthood. And so we see our work on a college campus as extremely important in that we have this 4-year window with these students during this extremely developmental time in their lives, that if they don't get their Jewish connection or a connection to Israel while they are with us, the likelihood that they are going to find it post-college is extremely diminished. It makes even, I know Jill is on the other end of that, right? So Jill is seeing probably the difficulties of students who didn't get that experience in college, and how much more effort and investment it takes to try and move them to be a member of the community or to participate or to even care. So our goal is within those buckets of programming to empower as many students as possible and help as many students as possible find at least 1, if not 2, of those buckets that they connect with, so that when they graduate, they have something meaningful that carries them through their adult Jewish life. I will now take questions.
Benji, I'm barging in here, guys. Benji, could you perhaps dedicate talk a little bit about what's going on campuses right now?
What? There's nothing happening on campuses right now.
It's quiet. Okay, next question.
What are you talking about? Campuses are amazing. Everybody loves Israel on college campuses in America. They all want you to come and visit. They all want to come visit you. They think Israel's great, and that listen, I think the one thing I would share about college campuses, social media makes it look a lot worse than it is. I think it is very bad. I think students don't feel physically unsafe, but they feel threatened because they don't know who stands with them and who stands against them, and people hide behind handles and other things on social media. And there are, so I'll put it this way, at a university in the US, there's the university, and then there's departments, right? You are all in departments. You're in agriculture or psychology or whatever, there's departments. Here at the University of Minnesota, there is probably 200 different departments, right? There are 4 absolutely what I would call horseshit departments. They are departments where they are clearly using their status as professors to push their political narratives. They're pushing it into the classroom where it's not appropriate. And our community is trying to identify where these things are happening and push back. But they make themselves look like they represent the entirety of the university. And the the media likes to grab onto these things and point to it as being the entirety of the university that's the problem. And really, here at the University of Minnesota, there are probably 50 bad actors amongst a faculty of 5,000. But they make themselves very loud, and they build networks, and they write op-eds in the school paper, and they have die-ins where they all lay on the front yard of the student union and pretend to be dead bodies. And they make a loud voice, and they make people feel uncomfortable. And that's their goal. And sadly, a lot of their messages have taken hold in that they use really nice language that relates to people that care about the world and justice, and people that don't dive into the deeper meaning behind things, right? As Jews, we hear the dog whistle of like, well, you just said that, and in my space, as a Jew, the way that I'm educated, that means my death. And they're like, no, we're just talking about the rights of the people. And like, no, you're not. And that's a nice thing to get people to join your cause. There's this whole thing, I don't know if you have it in Israel, but intersectionality, right? Where there's like your cause is my cause is your cause. That also causes a lot of issues on a college campus, right? In my space, so examples in Minneapolis, George Floyd was murdered by the police. And the following week, the pro-Palestinian groups on campus were showing pictures of that alongside of a member of the IDF with their knee on the back of the neck of a Palestinian and saying, if you stand for Black people's rights here in Minneapolis, you have to stand for Palestinian rights in the Middle East. Or they will show the wall along the southern border of the US along the Mexican border. And they'll say to the Mexican student or the Latino student group on campus, you know, you don't like the wall they're building? Well, we already have a wall, so we need to stick together. And they're finding all these common links together to say, our cause is your cause is our cause. It's strange because the Jews are the ones being left out of these spaces. And so when I say there's no physical harm being done, there is definitely harm being done. And it's not something that can be solved in like an overnight thing. Like, we're going to use this tactic and we're going to go do this thing and it's all going to change. There's got to be some really big thought partners thinking about the 5, 10, 15-year plan for how to drive change. Because what we're seeing on college campuses today, in my opinion, is the fruition of that 15-year plan by somebody else who said we need to drive a different narrative on our college campuses in the US.
Yeah. Oh, that's very insightful. Thank you for that. Rehovot, questions?
Yes, I have a question.
I skipped Hodaya
Okay,
last
I'll
time,
start,
so
okay?
Hodaya starts.
Yes. Like, do you answer, do you respond to this organization, to these people, as a led organization?
So
Or
yes,
you prefer
and
not to take a
yes.
stand?
No, yes and no. Part of our mission revolves around a connection to Israel. So we have been demonized on campus as the Zionist group on campus, right? There are groups that won't work with us because we stand for Israel. They don't ask us what that means. They just assume that the narrative that's out there means that we're bad. We are strategic about where we push back. So I'm going to just, I can't do it here because it's not set up that way, but I'm going to screen share for a hot second. Hold on. Screen share. So can you see this, this list?
Yeah.
This is since October 9th, all of the anti-Israel things that have happened on our campus every single day. What has been happening and the different groups that have been protesting and the things that they've been doing on our campus, as well as links to all of the media coverage of what's happening on our campus and the departments that have put out statements against Israel on our campus. So it's an everyday thing. and we can't respond to every single thing. But I would tell you all 70 things that you just saw for a hot second on that list are coming from the same 25 or 30 people that are running those actions. And we have to pick and choose where we speak up and where we speak back. And a lot of it is trying to figure out where the law is around free speech and academic freedom, as well as where the university's rules and regulations are, and trying to keep a close eye on when those things cross lines, because otherwise it sadly becomes almost like the sky is falling type situation, right? If we complain every single day about every single thing that happens, they get desensitized to it and they won't take action. So we really have to wait for those moments where they are extreme to be able to work with our colleagues within the university to say, this is one that needs attention. And we've had 3 or 4 of those where we've had action. But sadly, we have to track every single day of things that are happening and decide when is it worth speaking back, when is it worth just saying it's the same 25 people protesting on campus again, and we don't need to give them more attention every time they show up.
We have time for one more
I
question.
guess, oh, sorry.
Go on.
Yes, when you talked earlier, you spoke a lot of about the non-Jewish part of the university. So I don't know really much about the Jews in the university, and I wanted to ask if you're trying to speak the Judaism to the non-Jews, non-Jews, or you try to how to say, sorry.
תגיד בעברית.
אם מנסים כאילו למכור את היהודים לאמריקאים, או שהם מנסים פשוט לחבר את היהודים שלא מכירים אותם.
He's asking if you're trying to if your focus is on getting Jews to become closer to Judaism, or are you trying to persuade non-Jews also to get closer to Judaism?
So for us, our mission on campus is to inspire as many Jewish students as possible to make connections to Jewish life, to Jewish learning, and to Israel. And we highly encourage them to bring their friends along to learn with them.
Okay, great. Benji, thank you very much. Stick around with us, please. And Jacob.
Hello, everybody. I think I'm the closing act now. So, you know, the faster I am, the faster we wrap up. But no,
they're here for the next 15 minutes.
So I guess we got 15 minutes. But no, I'm happy to be here with you, and I'm supposed to talk about Jewish leadership in the American landscape and a reflection on anti-Semitism and influence. And I think it's important. So my previous 5 years, up until a few weeks ago, I had been the national liaison for Jewish communal institutions for the American Jewish Committee. The American Jewish Committee is one of the large, over 115 years old Jewish communal organizations. There's really, of the really big ones, you know, there's the American Anti-Defamation League, the Jewish Federations of North America, AIPAC, and the American Jewish Committee. Those are kind of like your big, you know, mainstream legacy institutions in the United States that work across the spectrum. And a lot of the work that I had done was working with AJC leadership, but also working with leadership of other various Jewish institutions, like the ones I just mentioned, the religious movements, Hillel International, Benji, and others, to make sure we were coordinating messages, make sure we were talking to each other, because oftentimes the perception is that American Jewish institutions are, you know, even though we have similar goals, although there's different lanes that we all work in. Some campus, you know, some work with members of Congress, some work with Jewish communities, some work to raise money for, you know, institutions. But there's a perception out there that there's a lot of competition, and to some degree that is true. You know, we all need to raise money and do all that work. But Benji's saying no. Benji's so good at it though. So, but you know, there is some competition. But the reality is a lot of the work we're doing is working together. And I think especially post October 7th, we are seeing more and more of that working together. And I think one of the really amazing things that we're seeing in the American Jewish communal landscape right now is the ability of the Jewish community to work together. And I don't know what, like, Benji, you're working for another Jewish organization, what your perception is on campus, but I think the work that's being done, particularly to combat anti-Semitism, kind of in all of the manifestations we're seeing in the United States, is very impressive. And I think that is, if I can say it, a silver lining from the tragedy and what we've seen in October 7th, is the ability of the American Jewish community to really kind of band together and work together. Because as Benji alluded to, we are seeing problems that are so big, so consistent. It's like that game, whack-a-mole. It's like you hit one and the next one pops up. And so I think that's something that that's really great to see. Since the past few weeks, just so you all know, I've left AJC and I'm on the funder side now. So now I'm giving money to organizations to support Israel and American Jewish life. So happy to talk to anybody about that. But the things that we're looking at now are similar things. Is how can we impact good projects in the United States? How can we work together with Jewish organizations, Jewish leaders, campus leaders, to make positive impacts and positive changes in the American landscape? And I think, with the rise in anti-Semitism, even before October 7th, as you know, we've been running studies. ADL's been doing it, AJC's been doing it, JFNA's been doing it, and they all say the same thing, which is the American Jewish community sees and feels this rise in anti-Semitism in the United States. It's become much more kind of violent, as you've seen, starting in Pittsburgh, 5-6 years ago or so. The attacks we've seen in Poway, the hostage situation in Texas a few years ago, it's becoming much more of a more visceral reality for American Jews. And the reaction to that anti-Semitism is that the American Jewish community has operationalized itself in a way to hopefully to work with law enforcement, for example, but also to pass laws in different states and different cities in the United States to, define anti-Semitism. Oftentimes there's no definition of anti-Semitism. It's just a hate crime, or, beating someone up because they're Jewish isn't necessarily anti-Semitic. You may have seen, if you all remember when the hostage situation in Colleyville, Texas happened, I think it was 2 years ago or so. Do you remember that? Anybody? No? Okay, well, there was a situation 2 years ago during Shabbat, one Saturday morning. An Islamic extremist broke into a synagogue in Texas outside of Dallas, held the congregation hostage because he believed, which is an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, that Jews had the power to free the captured terrorists, I think in Guantanamo Bay or something like that. Anyway, the point is when the FBI was asked about the hostage situation going on, the FBI's initial response was that there was no sign that this was an anti-Semitic attack. And the fact that the FBI, they later corrected that statement because it clearly was anti-Semitism. But the fact that the FBI originally said that this wasn't anti-Semitism, that this was like a random occurrence that occurred, signifies that there's a lot to be done to combat anti-Semitism. The Jewish community understands anti-Semitism, but what we've seen in survey after survey done by numerous organizations is that anti-Semitism really isn't understood by the general population as a whole. So helping people understand what anti-Semitism is has been helpful in helping to combat anti-Semitism in the United States. And we've seen success in that, helping train law enforcement, helping train elected officials, helping work with interfaith and intergroup groups as well. And I think we're seeing some of the positive outcomes of that. But I think the reality of the situation is that the American Jewish community as a whole, when I say that, I mean like the organized mainstream of the American Jewish community. And so, groups like federations, the Anti-Defamation League, the American Jewish Community, Hillel, I would include in that statement, and the mainstream religious organizations, denominations, the Reform, conservative, and Orthodox movements really have been working together very well to coordinate with each other, even though we don't always agree on everything. As you know, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. But there's really I've seen a positive movement in this space. because we recognize that the problems here are so big. And the United States Jewish community, it's loud, it's powerful, and we have to do a better job of making sure we're all kind of reading off the same script, and fighting all these problems that we're seeing. So I know I covered a lot of different things right there, and I'm happy to take questions. I think we have 5-6 minutes left here. So.
Fawad?
Yes, I would like to ask, it seems that one of the big missions is the social media.
Yeah.
When I see it, it looked like the anti-Semitism comes from ignorance of the people. They are saying things that are not related to, and it's look like you are dealing with higher levels of the problem, going to the court, rules and all of that. But the roots are from the knowledge that all of the citizens got. What are the actions that you are doing with the population?
So that you're right. Social media is a huge problem right now. And there's a lot of, especially I think, foreign influence on social media to create heightened levels of anti-Semitism. But I can tell you from the American Jewish Committee where I was working, and I know other organizations are doing this too, but we have been working with like TikTok and Meta and all those, and Instagram is Meta, and Twitter and X, whatever it's called now, to help them better understand anti-Semitism, to combat Holocaust denial in particular. So those conversations have been occurring. Organizations have also been beefing up. I know Stand With Us is big in this space. AJC is as well. There's others out there have really been working to create better content, working with social media influencers to create factual information on Israel and the situation going on in Israel and Judaism, but it's an uphill battle, to say the least. I mean, in the United States is a little bit different because we have First Amendment and free speech going on, but you've seen other countries where that doesn't exist, particularly in Europe. They've cracked down on a lot of Holocaust denials. Is something. The United States is different, obviously, because of the First Amendment. But we've been working. The American Jewish community has been working very closely with social media organizations and have been really working to ramp up their social media departments, so we can at least compete on some level with all the stuff that is out there. But I also do agree with you. A lot of it is ignorance. Survey after survey that's been done on understanding of anti-Semitism and the Holocaust, I'll say the same thing, which is that most people don't know very much about Judaism, about Jews' ties to Israel, about the Holocaust. We're seeing those numbers are becoming more and more problematic, as we move farther and farther away from World War II. So I think the most important thing we can do is, keep supporting organizations that are doing good work, but also, sharing good content on our social media feeds and making sure that that's all, being pushed out there is important as well. But yes, social media is a big problem, and I don't have any magic bullet other than to just keep fighting the good fight. But like I said, I feel like it's almost like whack-a-mole, right? It's like you do one thing, but 10 other things pop up in its place. So it can feel like a lot, but I think I think the last thing here I want to say, and is kind of what Benji said as well, is that things look really bad, but the reality is, social media is also not real life. And you look at like Twitter or Instagram, and it can look like, everybody is, hates Jews and is anti-Israel. But then you look at actual polling done in the United States, for example, and it's, much different than what you see on social media. So I think that's another thing to keep in mind as well.
Thank you.
I would like also to ask a question if it's possible.
Yep, we got
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll be short, but I do hear like about few years ago, it was before October 7th, about Jewish people that don't agree with some of the political stuff in Israel. So I'm not too sure what is going on after like October 7th, but how do you like manage with this kind of things, because they are also Jews and there is anti-Semitism, but there is kind of a difference between Judaism and Stand With Israel.
So no, that's a good question. I mean, you see, generally, so the most accepted definition of anti-Semitism, and you know, if you get a little controversial, is the the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance (IHRA) definition of anti-Semitism, which I think has been adopted by 30 some odd countries in the world and 34 states in the United States, including hundreds of cities and municipalities, etc. And that does talk about how anti-Semitism and being critical of Israel are two obviously very separate things. However, oftentimes anti-Zionism it becomes anti-Semitism very quickly and can bleed into that very quickly. So I think that's something to be aware of. And I think a lot of ignorance around that as well, by the way, Duty. But I will say in terms of like Jewish groups that are blatantly anti-Zionist, groups like If Not Now in the United States, Jewish Voices for Peace in the United States. I mean, Jill and Benji can chime in here, but from the perspective of like the American Jewish Committee and mainstream Jewish organizations, those groups are very much outside the tent. They're not, you can be critical of Israel, but those kind of anti-Zionist voices, and I mean, Benji, you can tell me you're on campus, like we never work with those groups. We consider them, not kosher. They are like outside the tent. So we don't work with them. I think by and large, they're a very small part of the Jewish community. They're loud. And I think that's the other thing about social media as well, is you see a lot of loud voices that aren't necessarily representative of, the actual feelings out there. But those organizations are very much not part of the discussion. That being said, being critical of like the Israeli government or being critical of Netanyahu or being critical of policy choices in Israel is certainly something that is there's vibrant discussions going on constantly in Jewish communities across the United States and synagogues across the United States. Should right now, I mean, I know in Israel you're having discussions, is it better to find a deal to release the hostages, or do you want to just destroy Hamas? I mean, there's a lot of like policy decisions and discussions going on. Those discussions are fine. But it's groups that are kind of very anti-Zionist, very anti, that are protesting, Sloan Kettering Hospital outside New York City because they have Jewish donors. Those groups are outside the tent, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Jacob.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Okay, so our speakers, I would like to thank you very much for taking the time from your schedule in the middle of the day and sharing your perspectives and enlightening us on the Israeli side, because we're not exposed to these intricate aspects of Jewish life in the States in general, and of course not in Minneapolis. So thank you very much for bringing that knowledge to our lives. And hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again sometime soon, perhaps under different circumstances, when you're here visiting in Rehovot, or perhaps the students will be behaving good enough and they'll all get a trip all together to Minneapolis. You'd like that, wouldn't you? Not going to happen. So Rabbi Jill, Benji, and Jacob, thank you very much. Noah, thank you for taking the time to join us. Always lovely to see you. And,
good luck, everybody, with your school year. Stay safe, and we are here for you if you have any other questions.
Wonderful. So guys,
it's been nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having
Thank you.
us.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good morning.